We start in the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful. All praise is due to God, the Lord of the worlds, and may peace and blessings of God be upon His Prophet Muhammad, his family, and companions. Students, faculty, friends, and colleagues, I greet you all with the Islamic greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today is the third event in a series of events sponsored by the Muslim Student Union at UCI. The Muslim Student Union is a religious student organization which aims to provide a comfortable space where students develop into confident, spiritual, moral, and high-achieving leaders who, in turn, are a positive influence and example for their surrounding communities. This week, titled Palestine Liberation Week, Getting to the Roots of the Occupation, aims to educate and raise awareness on campus about the plight of the Palestinian people who have been living under illegal occupation for almost 64 years. With the hope that this knowledge will turn into action, our annual week has unfortunately often been misconstrued to be one that harbors anti-Semitism. The MSU has clarified numerous times and will continue to clarify that hatred of any particular group on the basis of their race, color, ethnicity, or religion, including people of the Jewish faith, is not and will not be tolerated. We will be the first to speak out against these injustices, just as we would speak out against any other form of racism, no matter what group it targets. Although this goes without saying, the MSU strives to explicitly state its beliefs nonetheless. It is absolutely hypocritical and immoral to label anyone who has the courage to stand up and speak out against apartheid policies of Israel as anti-Semitic. The week's aim, in short, is simply to call for an end to the oppression of the indigenous Palestinians, just as it would make sense to call for an end to the oppression that took place in Nazi Germany or apartheid South Africa. It is absolutely imperative that we call for an end to 64 years of systematic subjugation and repression of the Palestinian people. Co-sponsors for this week include Students for Justice in Palestine, Afghanistan Development Project, Alianza Kababian, Asian Pacific Student Association, Central American Student Association, Dreams at UCI, Kababayan, and Radical Student Union. We ask that you maintain respect for the speaker and utilize the question and answer portion at the end for any questions that you may have. Please refrain from harassing individuals in the audience, and any and all inappropriate behavior will be referred to the campus police. If you choose to hold signs, please keep them in the designated areas so as not to block the view of others. If you are part of the press or recording the event, please utilize the press box over there. Before we start today's event, we will begin with some verses from the Muslim holy book, the Quran.
I'll be reciting a few verses from the Holy Quran. The purpose behind it is we get most of our political and spiritual drive and motivation from this Holy Scripture. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا وإن تلووا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا صدق الله العظيم. The translation of the verses: in the name of God, Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Believers, be the supporters of justice and testify to what you may have witnessed. For the sake of God, Allah, even against yourselves, parents, and relatives, whether it be against the rich or the poor. God must be given preference over them. Let not your desires cause you to commit injustice. If you deviate from the truth in your testimony, or decline to give your testimony at all, know that God is well aware of what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Yusuf. Today's speaker, Amir Abdel Malik Ali, is an imam from Oakland, California, as well as an African-American Muslim speaker and activist. He is a community organizer in Oakland and frequents university campuses across the country. He is an inspiring speaker and community activist who has dedicated his life to building the American Muslim community. He reverted to Islam while in college after being inspired by the struggles of Malcolm X and strives to follow his legacy of speaking truth to power and community grassroots mobilization. Thank you. And without further ado, Amir Abdel Malik.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله أحمده واستعينه واستهديه واستغفره وأؤمن به جل وعلا ولا أكفره وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. All praise is due to Allah. I praise Him, I seek His help, I seek His guidance, I ask His forgiveness. I believe in Allah and do not disbelieve in Him. And I bear witness there's none worthy of worship except Allah. And I bear witness of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, is His servant and messenger. Allah sent him, that is Muhammad, with Deen al-Haq, with the true way of life. This true way of life, al-Islam, shall reach its proper place in the world, although the enemies of truth and justice may hate it. My respected brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies, we greet you in the greeting words of peace. May the peace of Allah be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you today. Once again, UCI, MSU, finds itself on the forefront of protecting the dignity and honor of our fellow Muslim brothers and sisters and all of those who are being oppressed. It's interesting that they had an IDF soldier making the rounds on the university campuses. An IDF soldier, part of an organization that promotes apartheid and part of an organization that commits massacres on unarmed people. They had an IDF soldier making his rounds on the different campuses. And what they are telling you, the Zionists, what they are telling you, the Muslims, is that it is okay for us to invite someone who you don't like, but don't you dare invite someone that we don't like. That's some serious arrogance, ain't it? And any Muslim who goes for that, who falls for that, will be broken. They'll be broken. Their faith will just go out the window to even consider something as foolish as that. So, UCI, MSU, it is an honor and a privilege to be here with you. And for those people of conscience, it's an honor to be with you as well. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, my respected youth in this current generation, we are living in an age of corruption. The electoral process has been hijacked by corporations. The judiciary has been corrupted and bought. Universities are prostituting themselves for the corporate dollar. The press shuts out the most important voices in the country and feeds the people the most absurd information you could ever see. Our economy is in the hands of swindlers and speculators, and the public is enchanted by, as one writer said, hallucinations, electronic hallucinations, and they remain passive. Injustice is rampant, and a president who is a professor of constitutional law is destroying the Constitution. we live in an age of corruption. The whistleblowers who speak up and speak out about their bosses who are breaking the law, the whistleblowers are persecuted and the bosses are left off the hook. We even saw a situation in which these policemen in Georgia walked up on some Girl Scouts and told them they couldn't sell their Girl Scout cookies because they didn't have a permit. Whereas on Wall Street, where crooks have stolen hundreds of billions of dollars, not one person has gone to prison. Not one. We're living in an age of corruption. We're living in an age where oppressors, invaders, occupiers are being seen as heroes. Invaders, occupiers are being seen as people who are honorable, while those who are oppressed, while those who are being invaded, while those who are being occupied are being vilified as criminals and terrorists. We're living in an age of corruption. And the higher up you go, the bigger the lies. The higher up you go, the bigger the deceits. And one of the biggest deceits is that Zionism represents freedom, justice, and equality, when in actuality, it represents the exact opposite. Slavery, injustice, and racism, and inequality. And the higher up you go, the more you have to buy into that lie and that deceit. Let me give you an example, because I want to share with you how Zionism itself corrupts the one who believes in it. It corrupts the Zionist Jews, and it corrupts the supporters of Zionism. It corrupts them to the core, to the point to where they can subject a people to apartheid conditions, having them living in refugee camps, and actually justify the act. I want to start with your president, Mr. Udall. And for our non-Muslim friends, so you have to understand, for these Muslim youth to stand up and speak truth to power, they are standing up and speaking truth to power like against seemingly insurmountable odds. The president of the UC system is a Zionist Jew, and he supports the apartheid state of Israel. How can you be a president of a system and support apartheid? How can you be highly educated and support apartheid, try to justify apartheid? But I want to share with you some features of the letter that he wrote to the UC community, because it is a letter that is hypocritical, and it is a letter that is actually the opposite of what it is actually intended. The letter is to the UC community, and the letter is designed to promote a climate of tolerance. As I said, it is actually a letter of intolerance. He's talking about that there's a need for promoting intolerance, on the campuses. Promoting tolerance on the campuses and making sure there's not a climate of intolerances. And he mentions 5 incidences. He mentions 5 incidences of intolerance. And he mentions that these incidences is unacceptable, all right? Here are the 5 instances of intolerance that he mentions that prompted him, as he said, to write the letter. The first incident of intolerance that he mentions is when an IDF soldier was at a university and someone interrupted him and accused him of being a rapist, murderer, and so on and so forth, and being a part of a criminal organization. That's the first incidence of intolerance that he mentioned. The second incidence of intolerance that he mentioned was the defacing of an Israeli flag on one of the campuses. This took place on some of the UC campuses. The defacing of the Israeli flag. The third incident of intolerance that he mentioned was involving the African American students at UC San Diego a couple of years ago. The fourth instance of intolerance that he used is occurred against the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender resource center. I think that's at UC Davis. And the fifth instance of intolerance that he mentioned was that a swastika was drawn on a door of something of a Jewish student. Now, those are the 5 incidences that he mentioned with respect to intolerance. We are living in an atmosphere of Islamophobia. We are living in an atmosphere of a witch hunt. You have how many universities in the UC system, and how many thousands of Muslim students who go to these universities, and you couldn't mention one instance of intolerance towards a Muslim? And for him not to mention a case of intolerance towards a Muslim in an atmosphere of a witch hunt and Islamophobia is in itself an act of intolerance. Because what he did was, he followed the media plan. And in the media, you're not allowed to show a Muslim or a Palestinian or an Arab, what have you, from a sympathetic perspective. You're not supposed to sympathize with them in any way. That's like the policy of the media. Don't sympathize with Islam, don't sympathize with Muslims, and do not sympathize with the Palestinians. And so in his letter, he did not mention one incident of something that happened to a Muslim or to a group of Muslims. I can help him. Not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, some student group put pictures of the Prophet Muhammad, or who they said was the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, put some pictures of him, and it was extremely disrespectful. Now, how come someone drawing a swastika is something that is injurious, which it is? How come someone drawing a swastika is something that is that cannot be tolerated, which it shouldn't? How come that shouldn't be tolerated, and that is injurious, and not the pictures of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that they show him being disrespected? How come that wasn't put on the list? How come that wasn't cited as an act of intolerance? Why not? But no, at that time, I'm told that the MSU was simply told that it is their right to free speech. What? Right to free speech? That they have a right to put that type of information out there that is inflammatory? They have a right to do that? Okay, I see. Well, make sure that when we come to campus, you tell certain forces that the MSU has a right of freedom of speech to bring up these issues with respect to Zionism. We are living in an age of corruption. And then in the letter, President Udolph goes on to say that he is turning to the Museum of Tolerance and the Anti-Defamation League to help to foster a climate of tolerance on the campuses. The Museum of Tolerance is a Zionist-led organization. The Anti-Defamation League is a Zionist-led organization. How are you going to go to people who believe in apartheid to come to a campus and to help the campus develop a climate of tolerance? This is deceit. This is straight up deceit. They are not qualified. Anyone who believes in Zionism, believes in apartheid, and they are not qualified to be role models, to teach a community how to set up a climate of tolerance. We're living in an age of corruption. And just as Zionism has corrupted those Jews who believe in it, so too America has been corrupted by the philosophy of empire. The reason why America can give $4 billion a year to the apartheid state is because the Americans themselves have been corrupted by empire. You see, here's what happens. When you believe in empire, you become hypocritical. When you believe in empire, you say one thing and you do another. I'll give you an example. When President Obama went to Egypt before the revolution, President Obama went to Egypt and said to the Muslim world, "Assalamu alaikum." And the Muslims were so tickled because no president of the United States ever said, "Assalamu alaikum." And the president went on to tell the Egyptian people that they should grab hold to the rope of democracy. And when the Egyptian people grabbed hold of the rope of democracy and kicked Mubarak out, who did President Obama support? He supported Mubarak. You see, in empire, once you get corrupted by empire, you'll talk democracy. But any government that is democratically elected by the people, and it goes against empire, you destabilize and destroy that government. Hold on. You're supposed to be a democracy. You're supposed to believe in democracy. Why are you destroying this government that was democratically elected by the people? It's the corrupting influence of empire. And so now all over the world, America, the citadel of democracy, supports dictators and puppets and tyrants. Support them all. That's why they couldn't go against Mubarak, right? That's the corrupting influence of empire. And so when the United States sends that $3 and $4 billion to the apartheid state, sends the F-16 jets, the M1 tanks, the helicopter gunships, the phosphorus bombs, the one-ton bombs that the Israeli Defense Forces dropped in residential neighborhoods, dropped a one-ton bomb on an apartment building, a straight-up massacre. And let me tell you, when these phosphorus bombs hit, when these helicopter gunships hit, when these M1 tanks hit, and these F-16s hit, the Palestinian peoples don't run and get their F-16s. They don't have it. They don't run and get their M1 tanks. They don't have it. They don't run and get their helicopter gunships. They don't have it. And they don't have one-ton bombs. They don't have all this stuff. And so when the Israelis massacre or decide to massacre the people, of course, in this age of corruption, we have to look at the Israelis as being the good guys, the Israelis as being David and the Palestinians, the people who are being bombed and burned. They're supposed to be Goliath. It's an age of corruption. We are living in a time of universal deceit. And so there's no tears for the Palestinians on the part of the United States. And those bombs say what? Made in USA. And the tanks say what? Made in USA. And the tractors that they use to destroy Palestinian homes, what do they say? Made in USA. It is the corrupting influence of empire. Because the ordinary American, the common, ordinary American, is actually against empire. That's what the American Revolution was about. It was a fight against empire. It was a fight against imperialism. But now America is now the imperial power. And it is this corrupting influence of empire that causes the American people, the American government, and the American system to be standing on the wrong side of history. You can't be standing on the side of the barks. You can't be standing on the side of the tyrants. You can't be standing on the side of the kings. And you can't be standing on the side of the Zionists in Palestine. But brothers and sisters, all praise is due to Allah, because this vilification of Islam, this vilification of Islam, this vilification of Muslims, and let me say for our non-Muslim friends, we have to deal with the elephant in the living room here. The Muslims are being vilified by the Zionists and also the imperialists as well. If you notice, the Zionists and the imperialists are standing together. The Zionists and the imperialists are standing together, all right? And the vilification of Islam and the vilification of Muslims that's taking place, this is being led by the Zionists. Why are they doing it? Number one, there is an Islamic awakening taking place in the world today. The Western media doesn't want you to know about it. This Islamic awakening is against empire, and this Islamic awakening is also against Zionism. And what is the goal of this Islamic awakening? The goal of this Islamic awakening is self-determination, self-rule. Doesn't everyone have a right to self-rule? Doesn't everyone have a right to self-determination with respect to, as long as it's going to be justice, right? As long as you ain't talking about apartheid, as long as you're not talking about subjugation, exploitation, and oppression of a people, you should be able to choose what system that you want. The American people should be able to choose what system they want. Muslims, we want to choose what system we want. We don't want a system imposed on us. So this Islamic awakening is what? It has to do with self-rule. It has to do with self-determination. And when they talk to you about the Arab Spring, they try to make y'all think that the Arab Spring was separate from the Islamic awakening. The Arab Spring is not separate from the Islamic awakening. The Arab Spring is part and parcel of the Islamic awakening. And as soon as, and like I said, they were deceiving y'all. But as soon as the people had elections, then you can see that this Arab Spring and this Islamic awakening is going hand in hand. Because as soon as the elections went down, who did the people vote for? What did they vote for? They voted for Islam. And so for the Zionist, for that Zionist knows that he's never beaten us as Muslims. When we fought for something else other than Islam, we were always beaten. But every time we fought in the name of Islam, we were never, ever, ever beaten. And so this is a threat. This Islamic awakening is a threat to the Zionists. Because as one Israeli official said the other day, he said, our concern is not Iran. He said, our concern is Egypt. Because right behind them, they got 80 million people. A country of 80 million people, our beautiful Egyptian brothers and sisters who are still fighting their revolution. The revolution in Egypt is not over. You see, Uncle Sam wants 21st century puppets. See, old models. Mubarak was an old model, right? The kings, they're old models. Sam is trying to get 21st century puppets. Because if you're a democracy, and the leader of democracy in the world, you can't be hanging around with dictators, right? They got to at least look like they for the people. They have to have a deception. They have to have the facade. When you're the president for life, that's not a facade. And then your son becomes president for life. That's not a facade. That's a dictator. So right now, what the United States wants are 21st century puppets. But this Islamic awakening, this call for self-determination and self-rule, we want to be Muslims. We want to live under the Islamic system. This is extremely, extremely frightening for the Zionists, because they know that in every Islamic awakening and in every Islamic movement, high on the agenda is dealing with that apartheid state in Palestine. That is high on the agenda. But there's another insidious reason. I told you that Zionism corrupts the individual who believes in it. There's another reason, a more insidious reason, why the Zionists are trying to wage this vilification campaign against Islam and Muslims. The current financial crisis and collapse, the architects of it are Zionists. Whether you're talking about Greenspan, or whether you're talking about Geithner, or whether you're talking about Summers, or whether you're talking about Blankfein, or whether you're talking about Diamond, I'm saying Zionism corrupts you. Zionism corrupts you. These are not righteous Jews who are doing this. These are not righteous practitioners of the Jewish faith who are doing this. These are them who have mixed injustice with their religion. And so, in order for the American people not to realize that, again, Islam and Muslims must be vilified. Oh, this is serious. This is very, very serious business. But as this age of corruption spreads, and Allah says in Quran, as many of you know, that truly corruption has spread on land and sea. That means corruption has become dominant in the world. Whether it's on land, on sea, corruption is dominant. But at the same time corruption is dominant, we are also entering into an age of resistance. Brothers and sisters, all praise is due to Allah. I want to read to you a quote by Desmond Tutu. This was done last month, April 2012. Here's what he said. He said, quote, "A quarter century ago, I barnstormed around the United States, encouraging Americans, particularly students, to press for divestment from South Africa. Today, regrettably, the time has come for similar actions to force an end to Israel's long-standing occupation of Palestinian territory and refusal to extend equal rights to Palestinian citizens who suffer from some 35 discriminatory laws." Bishop Tutu is calling for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against the apartheid state of Israel. He goes on. He says, "Many black South Africans have traveled to the occupied West Bank and have been appalled by Israeli roads built for Jewish settlers that West Bank Palestinians are denied access to, and by Jewish-only colonies built on Palestinian land in violation of international law. Black South Africans and others around the world have seen the 2010 Human Rights Watch report, which describes the two-tier system of laws, rules, and services that Israel operates for the two populations in areas of the West Bank under its exclusive control, which provide preferential services, development, and benefits for Jewish settlers while imposing harsh conditions on Palestinians. This, in my book, is apartheid, and it is untenable." End of quote. Untenable means you can't defend it. He's saying this is apartheid. He said no matter what you say, he's telling the Israelis, he's telling the Zionists, no matter what you say, you cannot defend this. No matter what you do, you cannot defend this. This is the proper stance to take. This is the proper stance of all people of conscience to take. And be very careful. We have to make sure. I remember a statement by Orwell. What did he say? He said, "During times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act." During times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. And we're moving into a situation in this country where telling the truth is definitely a revolutionary act, because there is so much deceit and there is so many lies. And anyone who tells the truth, who gives the truth, definitions that don't come from CNN and Fox News, then they're branded. And you have to be ready for this. You have to be ready. Because if you don't parrot the same party line of the oppressors, of the Zionists and the imperialists, and if you don't parrot that same party line, you're going to be called all kinds of names. You're going to be called a hate teacher, which is only partially correct. We want the people to hate injustice. We want the people to hate oppression. That's what we want the people to hate. But when you talk about hate teaching, they're trying to turn it around. Allah in Quran is clear. The way of blame is against those who oppress. The way of blame is not against the oppressed. The way of blame is against the oppressor. The way of blame is not against the oppressed. And so my Muslim brothers and sisters, you have to be careful. Any of you who stand up for the oppressed, they want to get you, they're going to get you in a trick bag, a psychological trick bag, whereas they want you to focus on the effect and not the cause. They want you to focus on the response to oppression and not respond to what the oppressor is doing. Never let them get you into that trap. Always focus on what the oppressor is doing. Always focus on what the oppressor has done. Don't let them get you into a situation where you start ridiculing the oppressed and you ridicule the oppressor's response to the oppressed. Always keep it focused on the oppressor, always. But you have to pay a price for it. Our beautiful brothers in the Irvine 11, I hope you all were following that very closely, because there were a lot of valuable lessons in that Irvine 11 type situation. I haven't been able to talk about it at all on the campus, of course, but since I'm here now, I want to say in public that what the Irvine 11 did was right. What the Irvine 11 did was righteous. What the Irvine 11 did was good, and there was nothing wrong with what the Irvine 11 did, especially with respect to being in the United States of America. Matter of fact, when we would come to the campus, people would try to shout us down. We ain't get all mad and call the police and stuff. That's what you want to do. That's what you're going to do. Because matter of fact, if you don't have the truth, we ain't got to worry about it, right? So we got the truth. And so therefore, if people want to shout out and so on and so forth, we don't go to the cops and that kind of thing. That's been happening to us all through the years. But then when the Muslims do it, of course, now it's a crime. When the Muslims do it. But you can do that to Muslims, but Muslims can't do that to anybody else. That sounds very, very, as a black man, that sounds very, very familiar. Extremely familiar. And I want to say too, that when our brothers and sisters were doing the whole hoodies and hijabs thing, when it was believed that our sister Shaima was killed by hate crime, and the situation of Trayvon Martin, this was an excellent development. Because now what Muslims are realizing is that the way that they're treating Muslims in America is the way that they treat black folks. And there's a connection here. And the way they treat Muslims in America is the way they treat Latinos. There's a connection here. And they don't want us to make that connection. But when you talked about hijabs and hoodies, that was right on time. Malcolm would have been proud of that, because that's Malcolm's program. You know what I'm saying? African Americans and Muslims coming together, that's Malcolm's program. That's why Uncle Sam don't want it. That's why the Zionists don't want it, because they know there's a natural relationship that takes place between black folks and Islam. There's actually a point where the identity of Muslims and black folks converge. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. That's why you can come to the hood and see non-Muslim black folks with Muslim names. Yeah, very common. Non-Muslim black folks with Muslim names. Because the identity of black folks in Islam, there's a point where it connects. And so when you saw that, when you saw what was taking place in the United States, and realizing that, yeah, we got to come together. Because I saw, there's some of us, we saw a long time ago. Remember when Fox News, Fair and Balanced, Fox News? Remember they put out a story, and they said Al-Qaeda. There's no such thing as Al-Qaeda. That's another okie doke, that's another deception. There's no such thing as Al-Qaeda. Like, no such thing as Al-Qaeda. No such thing at all. Anyway, so Fox News had talked about Al-Qaeda was bringing women to America, impregnating them. And then the children will be born in America. And then the children will be citizens. And once they grow up, they'll become terrorists. Ain't that cold? See, when they did that, I said, ooh, now you're getting these American people whose minds have been lightened, whose minds have been weakened. Now you're getting the American people to look at Muslim babies as terrorists. See, once they get to the point where they start training the people to look at our babies in a negative way, then you know Sam has gone to the height of his hatred. Because there's a certain type of hatred that he reserves for certain people. Whether you're Native American, and when I say Native American, I mean like English-speaking Native American and Spanish-speaking Native Americans. Whether you're Native Americans, right? Whether you're black folks, there's a certain type of hatred that he reserves for certain type of people. And he builds that hatred up. And so, see, the part of the problem with empire is the justification for empire. The justification for empire has always been white supremacy. We have to do this to you. It's the white man's burden. How come they said they're in Iraq? They said they're in Iraq because they have to teach the people how to govern themselves. Iraq been here for like 5,000 years. But they have to teach the Iraqis how to govern themselves. It's the white man's burden. See, the corrupting influence of empire, at the root of it, is the justification for empire. And that is white supremacy. We have to do this to these Africans. We have to do these to these Arabs. We have to do these to these Afghanis. And then they teach the people to develop a hatred towards them, like a hatred. That's why you see certain things happening where Afghanis, civilians being killed, and they're urinating on the bodies, or chopping off ears and so on and so forth, because there's a hatred. Once your culture becomes war and militarism, you have to justify it. And you justify it by dehumanizing these people. And it's unfortunate, because many of these young men who went over there to Afghanistan and Iraq, they're coming back here with post-traumatic stress disorder, type injuries that will last them for the rest of their life because they followed the wrong leader. We must not stand on the wrong side of history. We have to stand up in spite of this country heading into a fascist type climate. One of the differences between now and the 60s is because during the 60s, the fascist response of the government came a little later on. COINTELPRO and so on and so forth. What is happening now is there's a fascist state being set up right now before things are really getting started. And one of the best things that we've seen in recent times is the formation of the Occupy movement. This is excellent. This is good. And we hope that the Occupy movement continues and focuses on that 1%, who Allah calls the mutrafin, the corrupt rich. Look, y'all, there are people who are starving in this country. There are millions, like 50 million the government said, so you know it must be more. There are people, millions of people, who are losing their homes. Millions of people lost their pension. Millions of people, 50 million at least, who don't have health care. People who are going bankrupt because they have to pay for health care, so they're going bankrupt. These people, this 1%, these corrupt rich, whose motto is more is not enough. We told you a few years ago, we said that Americans are getting ready to find out that businessmen are not qualified to run a country. The MSU told you that 4 or 5 years ago, before the collapse. Businessmen are not qualified to run a country because all businessmen care about is windfall, profit. They don't care what they do to a society. They want to get paid. And so therefore, if it means taking jobs out of this country and leaving unemployment in its wake, they're going to do it because it's all about building that profit margin. There is a feeling going across this country where poor people, it's intensifying even more. Poor people are being looked at with contempt. The new poor are people who used to be middle class, and now they're poor. This was the greatest transfer of wealth in the African American community, in the Latino community. This was, in terms of how many people have lost their homes, it was the greatest transfer of wealth in our history, in the history of this country, when you put it all together. So there is a climate where the mutrafin, the corrupt rich, are becoming more and more arrogant. And for those of our non-Muslim friends, this whole civil liberties thing for Muslims, no, we're just the scapegoat. This is for y'all. This is for you. They're just using the Muslims as a scapegoat. So when they take your civil liberties, when you see civil liberties being taken, when you see the Constitution being scrapped, in your mind you're saying, oh, this is only Muslims. But no, it's going to go beyond us because the people are suffering so much. It's going to go beyond us, and it's going to hit other Americans. Can you imagine assassinating an American citizen just based on suspicion? Suspicion. That there's a suspicion that this person is involved in it, a suspicion. And you don't bring this person to no court hearing, right? No due process. I'm going to kill you based on a suspicion. You're not supposed to care about that because a person is a Muslim. You're not supposed to care about that. But this is going to go beyond the Muslims. The Muslims are being just used as a scapegoat. And so the Occupy movement, all these movements that are taking place, this is good. Even Time magazine, when they did their Person of the Year, who they picked? The protester. They know, Time knows, that we're entering into an age of resistance. Whether you call it the Arab Spring or the Islamic Awakening, the Occupy movement in the United States and in Europe, this is an age of resistance. Even Hollywood is starting to pick up on it. Hunger Games, and Avatar, and In Time, they're starting to pick up on it. No, it's a different type of climate that's coming about. But as we go into as we deal with this age of corruption, as a brother was reciting in the Quran, one of the manifestations of corruption is rampant injustice. I mean rampant injustice. And so it should be clear that what we are struggling for, what we're fighting for is justice. Justice in all of its forms. The people who lost their homes need justice. The people who lost their pensions need justice. The people who can't get access to health care need justice. The Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank need justice. Everyone all over this world who's fighting needs justice. And you have to understand, this struggle of the Palestinians and for the Palestinians is connected to the struggle against the mutrafin, the corrupt rich. It's connected to the struggle against empire. It's connected to the struggle against Wall Street. It's all connected. It's connected to the whole policies of destroying the environment and destroying the earth. We have to see this age of resistance in its totality. We can't be narrow-minded. There's going to be many different colors of people involved. It's going to be like a populist type of movement. And so we have to be very careful, because you can't judge a situation by the color of somebody's skin. You can't do that. That's dangerous. And I know it was a major thing for Barack Obama to be president, a black president, and so on and so forth. That was kind of deep. That is kind of deep. But do not judge him by the color of his skin. You judge him by his actions. You judge him by his deeds. And when people talk about, do you think Barack Obama is going to win, and so on and so forth, our position is clear. Barack Obama is already in. Barack Obama is already in, brothers and sisters, because the next theater of operations is Africa. Black Africa. That's the next theater of operations. That's why the troops are coming out of Iraq. That's why the troops are coming out of Afghanistan. The next theater of operations is Black Africa. He's already in Somalia. They already did a thing in Libya. They already broke up the Sudan. He announced that troops are going in Uganda. Troops are going in the Congo. The next theater of operations is Black Africa. And check this out. They cannot have a white man in the White House bombing Black Africa. You can't do it. Because if you have a white man in the White House bombing Black Africa, it's going to wake black people up all over this world. Because they'll see the contradiction. The contradiction will be stark. The contradiction will be clear. But if a black man is doing it, a black man with a Muslim name is doing it, and then they have the U.S. African Command, which is designed to remilitarize and recolonize Africa. The head of the U.S. African Command is an African-American general. Be very careful of just using color. We're living in a situation in the black community of a policy of mass incarceration. Mass incarceration is a policy they've adopted for the black community. Put them in prison as young as we possibly can. The top cop in the United States is an African-American. Be very careful of just using color as our judge. It's not about color. It's about your actions. It's about your deeds. It's about your conscious behavior. It's about your intentions. And so as this movement builds, it's going to be populist in scope. White people will be out there, like the Occupy movement. A lot of white students are out there. A lot of young white people are out there who seeing their homes of their family members being taken. Who seeing their family members having to declare bankruptcy because they don't have access to pay for medical bills. They're seeing what's happening to them, and they can't find jobs. The thing that came up the other day, but 50% of college graduates can't find jobs. And what is the mutrafin doing? No, they want more. And so if it means your tuition has to go up, your tuition will just have to go up. If it means that people will have less access to real health care, then that's what that means. We have to make our money. And so you have to make sure that you don't have dreams of becoming part of the 1%, because that's what they want you to do. Get your degree and have dreams of becoming part of the 1%. I want to be part of the corrupt rich. That's what somebody's clapping about. I want to be part of the corrupt rich. Hey, I want to be corrupt and rich too. See, ain't nothing wrong with being rich. Ain't nothing wrong with being rich. The problem is corruption. That's the problem. So anybody who claps about corruption, there's something wrong with you. Anyone who supports injustice, there's something wrong with you. Anyone who supports apartheid, there's something wrong with you. No, it's not what they're saying. Anyone who supports empire, there's something wrong with you. And so as you youth, I want to leave you with this, inshallah. The coalitions are important. The right coalitions are very important. We need to see a coalition of some down African Americans. Some down African Americans. We need to see a coalition of African Americans, Native Americans, like I said, English speaking and Spanish speaking Native Americans, because Latinos are Native Americans. They're Native Americans. This is their land. This is Mexico del Norte. This ain't nothing but northern Mexico. You feel me? And so they're Native Americans as well. And so I'm talking about African Americans. I'm talking about Native Americans, our Asian brothers and sisters, our progressive whites, the Muslims, and you should be anti-Zionist, and you should be anti-empire, and you should be anti-1%. That should be the bottom line as to where you're coming from. And you should be pro-justice, you should be pro-self-rule, a pro-people's right for self-determination, and you should be pro-99%. That's how this coalition should go. There's some difficult days ahead. There's some difficult days ahead. You're going to have, I'm talking to the youth, you're going to have to show, like in terms of education, and them raising the price of education, and not caring about you. You're going to have to show them that you're willing to sacrifice more than they're willing to sacrifice. That's what you have to do. And if you get into a situation, if you get caught up in your material things, then you're not going to do it. One of the reasons why they want you to get caught up in material things is because you won't sacrifice in terms of you don't want you to lose your material things. If you speak the truth, the first thing you'll start thinking is, I might lose my job. I might lose my money. I might lose my car. They want you attached to material things. Be very, very careful of this. This struggle is slated to get so intense that the people who will come to the forefront are those who are struggling for something more than just a flat screen TV. They're struggling more than just the job with a good salary. See, that's them. The reason why people sell out, is basically for one reason. The reason why people sell out to these Zionists is for one reason, basically. It's material things. It's material things. The reason why these politicians bow down to these Zionists is because of material things. The reason why they won't stand up and speak the truth is because they don't want to lose their material things. All this is based on their attachment to material comforts, to worldly benefits. I'm talking about anyone who sells out. That's the nature of selling out. You want to gain some worldly benefit. That's why we have leaders in our countries who are sitting on top of all this oil and they're using it just for themselves because they sold out, because they want to be rich. I'm not trying to romanticize poverty. I'm not. But you can't live a life in which all you want to do is be rich, rich, rich. Rich, 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 because check this out. These corrupt rich, they don't care about white people either. These same white folks who will stand for the system, who will support the system, these corrupt rich don't care about them either. Their houses are being taken too. With Enron, these were white folks who lost their pension. Those mutrafin, those corrupt rich who are running Enron, told those workers, mostly white, don't sell, don't sell. And they went ahead and sold and made $1.1 billion. And what did the workers get? They lost their pension. You think the mutrafin, you think those corrupt rich said, we can't do this to them. They're white, like us. They don't care about that. They're going at everybody. They don't care what color you are. And then they'll turn around and get white people to attack black people. You feel me? To take the spotlight off of the crimes that they're committing. They don't care about anybody. And the same structural adjustment, the austerity measures that you're seeing in Greece and Spain, right? In Ireland and Iceland and so on and so forth, Portugal, right? These same austerity measures that you're seeing there are going to happen here. And you know where that came from? Do you know where that came from? On so-called third world countries. When the IMF would go to these third world countries, give them loans they couldn't pay back. They would give them loans they couldn't pay back. Then the IMF would step in and tell them, well, look, we'll help you pay your loan back. How much money do you spend on education? Cut the amount of spending that you put into education. Cut the amount of spending that you put into health care. Cut the amount of spending that you put into food subsidies and give us the remainder of that. Those are called austerity measures. And when you stop spending on the people suffer. When you stop putting money in healthcare and education, the people suffer. When you stop putting money in food subsidies, the people begin to starve. But the IMF don't care about that. They don't care about that. They want to make their money. Well, check this out. Those same austerity measures that they used to use on so-called third world countries, they're using on you now. Not just black folks, not just brown folks. They're using on the ordinary, everyday American, because they don't care about Americans either. All they care about is money. And so these corporations are concerned that this age of resistance is going to lead to them losing power. They're concerned about this age of resistance that's coming that will cause them to lose power. So what is their response? Is their response to tell the government that they own to start spending more on social programs? No. Their response is to put in laws that will criminalize almost any type of dissent. That's their response. To give the president dictatorial powers, so that when the people start rising up, they'll be able to put people in seriously concentration camps. Yeah, ask FEMA. Ask FEMA about those holding centers, they call them. Holding centers, that they're getting ready for people who are getting ready to stand up. And they'll get the police. They'll get the 1%. These corrupt rich, they don't care about the police either. They'll use the police to do their own bidding. Just like the banks in New York, who gave the police about $3 or $4 million. Gave them $3 or $4 million to use that against the Occupy movement. We are headed for some difficult days. However, once this thing is done, America is going to be a totally different place once all this is done. But it's going to require sacrifice. Let me say to you young people, you're our hope. You're our hope. All the prophets saw the youth as being the hope, because the youth are the change agents. You African American youth, you Latino youth, you white youth, you Jewish youth, you Muslim youth, you are the hope. Because as in your youth, you're open to dealing with ideas, particularly issues of justice and injustice, because you're youth. This is very, very critical. But be very, very careful, because they're going to try to do things to you that's going to remove you from the movement. Let me give you an example real quick. There was a time where you weren't allowed to drink alcohol in this country, right? Prohibition, right? LENS, untouchables, right? That kind of thing. So you weren't allowed to drink alcohol. When did they allow people to drink alcohol again? In 1933. Why do you think they allowed people to drink alcohol then? Because depression was going on. We better either get them drunk or they're going to raise up against us. That type of thing. Don't be surprised. It's when this thing is really getting going, and this movement's getting going, and the youth are out there, and they're standing up, and they're sacrificing. Don't be surprised if they legalize marijuana at that time. Straight up. You youth, you got to be serious. You got to really look at your drug use. Drugs are used to stop resistance. Drugs are used to stop resistance. So this time when you come up with your counterculture, this time you have to make sure that your counterculture is not self-destructive. You have to make sure that your counterculture, there needs to be a counterculture, but you have to make sure that your counterculture does not promote self-destructive behavior, that your counterculture does not cause you to adopt a certain lifestyle that will keep you from resisting. So we're asking the youth, take your struggle to a higher level. You don't need drugs. You don't need it at all. At all. Any type of drug. And so when that woman and this woman at this Occupy thing, she was given the rules and regulations for the encampment, and she told the people there'll be no smoking or drugs of any kind. I said, all right. Now we're going to a higher level of struggle. Because back in the day, young kids, young youth, part of the revolution was getting blitzed. That was part of the revolution, getting blitzed. Not off alcohol, that's the system's choice of drugs. LSD. Yeah, turn on, cup, all that kind of foolishness. No, your counterculture cannot be self-destructive this time. It must be revolutionary, it must be radical. Y'all stay strong, inshallah. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. We now have time for a question and answer portion. Please keep your questions concise, and I mean concise, relevant to the speaker's topic, and respectful of the speaker. After you ask your question, please take a seat, and the speaker will only answer after you've left. Please keep your questions and comments at least 30 seconds. If you go over, I'll have to warn you that you have to keep your question concise. And we have 2 minutes before we have to cut the mic, so just let me know.
Okay, well, I'm always struck by this preamble that we hear, like we did today, about how the MSU rejects any racial or religious prejudice, particularly those against those of the Jewish faith. And then you bring in Malik, like every year, and he starts calling people Zionist Jews. Before it was Ram, Israel, Emmanuel, your words, Zionist Jew. David Axelrod, Zionist Jew. Rupert Murdoch, straight up Zionist Jew. Those are your words.
Yes.
This year, it's Mark Udall, Zionist Jew.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You do nothing to bring about any reconciliation between Muslims, Jews, and Christians, nor between blacks and whites. You are an anti-Semite, and you also hate your own country. And the Muslim student union who brings you, they own it.
Concise.
Okay? They own it.
Relevant to the topic.
Okay. My question is to the Muslim student union. How can you say that you reject anti-Semitism when you bring an anti-Semite to make anti-Semitic comments?
You can ask them that, but let me address something that you said. You guys have to stop equating Jew with Zionism. All Jews are not Zionists. And the reason why, check this out, y'all. The reason why I say Zionist Jew is because all Jews are not Zionists. It'd be unfair for me to say, it'd be unfair and unjust for me to say that to deal with all Jews as if they were Zionists. There are Jews who are raising their voices against Zionism. One of the groups that were supporting the Irvine 11 was the Jewish Voices for Peace. There are rabbis who are standing up against Zionism. And y'all, you young people, you young Jewish students, you got to check out those Jews who are speaking up against Zionism. Why are they doing that? What is it about? So, stop equating Jews with Zionism. All Jews are not Zionists, and all Zionists are not Jews.
We're not allowed to be free in our own.
It's not your homeland. It's not your homeland. It's like what's happening is that y'all came from Europe. It's not your homeland. When y'all got there, there were people there who were living there thousands of years before even the Hebrews got there. There were people living there thousands of years before the Hebrews got there. And today's Palestinians are partially like related to them. So you can't just go in somebody's country and just say, we taking your land. No. You gotta go back.
They're cutting the amplifier now, so sorry guys.
I'm sorry, I took too long in talking. I'm sorry. We should have more time. But we could do this though. We could do mic check. Mic check. Mic check. Mic check.
Concise question. Just a concise question. I can speak over it. It seems there's a huge elephant in the plaza that you ignore, and so I wanted to ask you. Do you continue to support the genocidal acts of Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and other violent Islamic ideologues?
I don't put. Do I continue to support the Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah, so on and so forth? He said the genocidal practices of them, that type of thing. This is another example of focusing on the oppressed and not the oppressor, right? No, it's another example of focusing on the oppressed and not the oppressor. When people stand up against oppressors, when people stand up against their oppression, what he's trying to do is, he's trying to get me to focus on the response. No, everyone has a right to fight against oppression. Even international law says that anyone who's being occupied has a right to fight against their occupation. Even international law says that anyone who's an occupier cannot claim self-defense. You can't claim self-defense. You're an occupier. So therefore, don't focus on the effect. Focus on the cause. It is Zionism that's causing this problem. That people feel they have to stand up and they have to fight. It is Zionism.
Thank you.
It's Zionism.
Thank you.